Now think about it. Those of you who are in public policy should know that the typical family in poverty line for a family of 4, parents and 2 kids, is 20,000, roughly. So we're talking for a family of 4, more than 10,000 a person, or more than 40,000. You follow those numbers? We didn't have a cocktail hour, so this is going to be a little easier than it might have been otherwise. So here we are, 40,000 per family, poverty line 20,000. And yet, we still have all these folks in poverty and on the welfare rolls. So there's something wrong here. But the question, the point you have to take away from that little numerical exercise is, it's not about money. And I love Jim's introduction of the course that he leads, limited government. Well, it doesn't need to get any bigger in this area. It absolutely does not. There is, if we just converted the money into cash, which is one of the questions one of the tables might have, hey, then everybody'd be out of poverty, right? That's true, absolutely true. But it's a lot harder than that, both politically and culturally. But here's another question. In fact, someone asked me this in the car today on the way back. How many of you believe that most of the people who are on welfare really want to work? Can you see a show of hands? Looks like about half and half. Well, there's been no research on this, but I think I'll be able to convince you that they really do want to work. Most people who are poor have the same hopes and dreams for their families as you do. And I believe that in my heart, and you have to believe that in order to work in this business, particularly for the price that I charge, which is nothing. Why should you care about this issue? I had a friend of mine who is a cultural conservative icon, a fellow named Paul Weyrich, whom you may or may not have heard of, but he's probably one of the 4 or 5 best-known conservative writers in the country. And he is, I would say, a card-carrying member of the right-wing conspiracy. I mean, I'm sure Hillary would recognize his name instantly. And you know what he said? He said, welfare is the Achilles heel of capitalism. In other words, how can we be the biggest, most prosperous economy in the world and still have people in poverty? This is a conservative saying this, and this is what I'm saying. That's wrong. There's something wrong about this, and it needs to be fixed. So as a proud American, you should be interested in this topic tonight. Secondly, as a taxpayer, you should be interested. That $520 billion, guess what? It's your money. It comes right out of your pocket. It doesn't come from some place called Washington. It comes from some place called Colorado Springs and Chicago and so forth. A lot of people forget that, but that's at the core. And thirdly, it's such a complex, screwed up business, the various levels of government, and I'll show this in my handouts that you have, that it's intellectually pretty interesting. You know, how could anything get that bad? And what can be done about it? It's kind of fun to try to sort through it, and that drove me sometimes when other things didn't. So, welfare reform, and you should know, 1996 is a historic time in our country's history. And that is when we really did end welfare as we then knew it. And welfare reform, I would argue, and we could spend some time if one of the tables has the question, has done more to transform the lives of disadvantaged people in our country than anything else that has happened in our lifetimes. Welfare rolls went from over 12 million to about 4.5 million. And you can't say it was just the economy of the 90s, because we've had good economies before and the welfare rolls have not budged. And when the economy went down, the welfare rolls stayed down. So no question it was easier to move people from welfare to work during the 90s because there were more jobs, but it is not the reason that the welfare rolls were reduced. And some hardcore members of the left-wing conspiracy still are in denial about it, but even most of them have come to accept this as a real success story. But Colorado, like many states, could do a hell of a lot better on this. Colorado lagged, was in the bottom half of states when I spoke here a year ago. You've edged up a bit, and now you're slightly above average in your success at moving from people from welfare to work. But there's still too many. There's still 30,000 people, roughly, on welfare in Colorado. I don't know the year-end '07 numbers. These are year-end '06 numbers, which are in front of you. And Colorado is behind 23 other states in this. And I think you should be embarrassed about that. And I want to get you embarrassed so some of you will go out and work and try to help fix it. I know Colorado is a county-run government in many respects, and so it has to be done piece by piece, much like California. And just getting people off the welfare rolls is not the same as getting people out of poverty. There's the second tranche, which is the working poor, which I'm quite concerned about and involved in, and I can tell you the EITC, which Colorado is doing a very poor job on, is a key to the working poor, and we'll talk about that. So, my credibility in all this, I think, stems from being a manager, and what we did in Illinois, in addition to benefit from what was done in national welfare reform. The reason we were, for a long time, the second most successful state, only to Wyoming. Now we're fourth to Wyoming, Idaho, and one other state. Even though Chicago is no easy pickings. I mean, I'm telling you. I'll tell you some Chicago stories that will convince you of that. But we really now know how to do it. And that's the reason I wrote the book. It's not easy to write a book. You know, you get down each morning and it's hard work. But I felt that we had learned how to do it. And so anybody that invites me and pays my plane ticket in a hotel gets me to, as my kids say, windbag about this for no cost, because I think when you're moving people to work, you're doing something not to people, but for people. You're giving them the chance to work. And until you spend time with the ladies in the backyard, who are talked about in chapter 2 of my book, and you see the barriers that they face when they have no car, alcohol and substance abuse, child care, education, all the barriers that they face. I've got a few nods going here. That's great. I don't do the talking back thing that they do in the African American churches, but a nod is good enough for me. I've got, well, anyway, I don't want to get off on that one. But so our challenge here in El Paso County is to finish the job. And I think that the goal for El Paso County should be to be at least as good as the 9 counties in Illinois, which have nobody on welfare. Nobody. 0. That's what El Paso County should do. We'll say, well, what about people who can't work and so forth? Well, for those of us in the business, we know that there's a thing called SSI, which is Supplemental Social Security, and if somebody really is disabled, they get off the welfare rolls and they get benefits there. And even people who are disabled, there's certain kinds of work that they can do. So one of the fears that people who ran the welfare offices in Illinois had is, what happens when there's nobody on welfare? What happens to my job? And that pops up a lot, because this business is one of the few businesses where the better you do, the smaller your market is. Think about the perverse incentive that represents. So my goal, as I'm running around the country and working in Alabama and Florida and some other projects that I'm doing in Michigan,